The dust clung to Eleanor Dawson's skin like shame as she stood on the auction block for the third time in her 22 years. Her father's trembling hand gripping her wrist so hard she could feel her pulse hammering against his fingers. The summer heat of 1882 bore down on Hawthorne, Nevada, with relentless fury, turning the mining town into a furnace where desperation bred like flies on rotting meat. Eleanor had learned long ago that her father, Thomas Dawson, loved whiskey more than he loved her, loved the turn of a card more than the daughter he had brought into this world. The first time he had tried to sell her, she had been 17, barely more than a child, standing in a saloon in Virginia City while men with hungry eyes circled like vultures. A kindly barkeep had seen the terror in her face and caused a distraction, allowing her to slip away into the night. The second time, just a year ago, her father had bartered her to a merchant passing through town. But the man's wife had appeared unexpectedly and put a stop to the transaction with a rolling pin and a stream of invective that could have stripped paint. Now, here she stood again, her father deeper in debt than ever before, his eyes bloodshot and his hands shaking from the previous night's drink. The man who held his marker stood beside them, a thick-necked brute named Garrett who ran the gambling hall and half the criminal enterprise in Hawthorne. Garrett had made it clear that Thomas either paid his debt in cash or in kind, and since Thomas had no cash, Eleanor had become the currency. "Gentlemen," Garrett called out to the small crowd gathered in the alley behind his establishment, "we have here a fine young woman, healthy, strong, good for cooking, cleaning, and whatever else a man might need." His leer made Eleanor's stomach turn. "Bidding starts at $200. Eleanor closed her eyes, willing herself somewhere else, anywhere else. She thought of her mother, dead these 10 years from consumption, and wondered if this was the legacy she had left behind, a daughter sold like cattle because her husband could not stay away from the bottle and the card table. "This is wrong." The voice cut through the murmur of the crowd like a knife through butter, clear and steady and utterly certain. Eleanor's eyes snapped open. A man stood at the edge of the gathering, tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that fell just past his collar. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, dusty chaps over worn denim, a blue shirt faded from many washings, and a hat that had seen better days. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, storm gray and fierce, fixed on her father and Garrett with unmistakable contempt. "Excuse me." Garrett's voice dripped with false politeness. "This is a private matter." "Private?" The cowboy stepped forward, moving with the easy grace of a man comfortable in his own skin. "You are conducting an auction in broad daylight in the middle of town. There is nothing private about it." He looked directly at Eleanor then, and she felt something shift in her chest, a recognition she could not name. "And there is nothing legal about selling another human being. Slavery was abolished 20 years ago. She is not being sold," her father stammered, his voice weak. "She is being offered as payment for a debt. It is different." "No," the cowboy said softly, dangerously. "It is not different at all." Garrett's face flushed red. "Who the hell are you to interfere in my business?" "My name is Isaac Holloway," the cowboy replied. "And I am making this my business." He turned his gaze back to Eleanor, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentle. "Miss, do you want to go with whoever wins this auction?" Eleanor's throat was so tight she could barely breathe, but she managed to shake her head. "No," she whispered, then stronger, "No, I do not." Isaac nodded as if this confirmed something he already knew. He looked at Garrett. "Then there will be no auction." "The hell there will not," Garrett snarled. He pulled a pistol from his belt, pointing it at Isaac. "You will walk away right now, or I will put a bullet in you." The crowd scattered, people diving for cover. Eleanor's father released her wrist and stumbled backward, his courage evaporating in the face of drawn weapons. Eleanor stood frozen, unable to move, watching as Isaac Holloway remained perfectly still, his hands loose at his sides. "You could shoot me," Isaac said calmly, "but there are witnesses here and you would hang for murder. Is Thomas Dawson's gambling debt worth your life?" "It is about principle," Garrett hissed. "No one challenges me in my own town." "Then we have a problem," Isaac replied, "because I am challenging you. Name your price for the debt. I will pay it and the girl goes free." Eleanor's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She stared at this stranger, this cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere like an answer to a prayer she had been too afraid to speak aloud. Garrett's eyes narrowed, calculating. $1,000. A gasp went through the remaining onlookers. Thomas Dawson's debt could not have been more than 200 at most. Garrett was testing this stranger, pushing to see how far he would go. Isaac did not flinch. "That is robbery and we both know it, but fine. $1,000. He reached into his jacket slowly, carefully, and pulled out a leather pouch. He tossed it at Garrett's feet. "There is 500 in gold. I have the rest in the bank. We will go there now and you will get your money." Garrett bent down, never taking his gun off Isaac, and opened the pouch with one hand. His eyes widened at the glint of gold coins. "You carry this much on you?" "I just sold a herd of cattle," Isaac said. "I was planning to buy land, but this seems like a better use of the money." The gun lowered slowly as greed overtook pride. Garrett looked from the gold to Eleanor to Isaac, weighing his options. Finally, he holstered his weapon. "The bank, now, and if you are lying, I will kill you and the girl both." "I am not lying," Isaac said. They walked through Hawthorne in a strange procession. Garrett in front, Isaac and Eleanor side by side, and her father trailing behind like a whipped dog. Eleanor's legs felt like water, but she forced herself to keep moving. She glanced sideways at Isaac, trying to understand what manner of man would spend his life savings on a stranger. "Why?" she whispered, so quietly only he could hear. He looked at her, and there was something ancient and sad in his eyes. "Because no one should be bought or sold. And because I have been watching your father drag you around town all morning, and the look on your face broke something in me." Eleanor felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. She had cried enough in her life. She would not cry now. The bank was a sturdy brick building in the center of town, one of the few permanent structures in Hawthorne. Inside, the cool dimness was a relief after the brutal sun. The bank manager, a fussy little man named Perkins, looked up from his desk with a practiced smile that faltered when he saw Garrett. "Mr. Garrett," he said nervously, "what can I do for you? This man," Garrett jerked his thumb at Isaac, "claims he has money in your bank. I want to see it." Perkins turned to Isaac, his expression shifting to recognition. "Mr. Holloway, of course. You deposited funds just yesterday. How much do you wish to withdraw?" $500, Isaac said. "In addition to the 500 you already withdrew this morning?" Perkins asked. "That is correct." Perkins bustled away to the safe, returning with a stack of bills that he counted out with meticulous care. He handed the money to Isaac, who immediately turned and gave it to Garrett. Garrett counted it twice, his thick fingers clumsy with the paper. When he was satisfied, he shoved the money into his coat and pulled out a grimy piece of paper. "Thomas Dawson's marker. As of now, his debt is paid in full." He thrust the paper at Isaac, then turned to Eleanor's father. "But you, Dawson, you are no longer welcome in my establishment. You show your face there again, and I will have you beaten and thrown in the street." Thomas nodded frantically, his face ashen. Garrett gave them all one last venomous look, then stormed out of the bank. In the silence that followed, Eleanor heard her own ragged breathing. Her father coughed, a wet, hacking sound. "Eleanor," he began, but Isaac cut him off. "No," Isaac said, his voice hard as iron. "You do not get to speak to her. You have forfeited that right. You tried to sell your own daughter not once, not twice, but 3 times. You are a disgrace." Thomas Dawson seemed to crumple in on himself. "I had no choice. The debt. There is always a choice," Isaac said. "You could have stopped gambling. You could have stopped drinking. You could have gotten honest work. Instead, you chose to trade your daughter's life for your own comfort." He took a step closer to the older man, and Thomas backed away. "If I ever hear that you have tried to contact her, if you ever come near her again, I will make you regret it. Do you understand me?" Thomas looked at Eleanor, his eyes pleading, but she turned her face away. She had nothing left for him, no forgiveness, no pity. He had used up every bit of love she had ever had for him. "I understand," Thomas mumbled, and then he shuffled out of the bank, a broken man. Eleanor and Isaac stood alone in the bank, except for Perkins, who was pretending to be very busy with his ledgers. Eleanor's hands were shaking. She clasped them together, trying to still the tremors. "Thank you," she said, and her voice came out hoarse. "I do not have a way to repay you. I have no money, no skills of any value." Isaac shook his head. "I do not want repayment. I want you to be free." "Free to do what?" Eleanor asked, and she hated how helpless she sounded. "I have no home now, no family, nowhere to go." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. "I have a ranch," he said finally. "It is small, just a homestead claim about 10 miles north of here. I run cattle, do some horse breaking. It is hard work, but it is honest. I could use help. If you wanted, you could come work for me. I would pay you a fair wage, give you a place to stay. You would have your own room, your own space. And if you decide you want to leave, you are free to do so at any time. No strings, no obligations beyond honest work for honest pay." Eleanor stared at him, searching for the trap, the ulterior motive. Men did not do things like this without expecting something in return. But Isaac's face was open, earnest. There was no leer in his eyes, no hidden hunger, just a quiet strength and a sincerity that made her want to believe him. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "You have already spent a fortune on me. Why would you do more?" Isaac smiled, and it transformed his face, softening the hard planes, warming the gray of his eyes. "Because I know what it is like to have nowhere to go, because I believe in second chances. And because," he paused, as if weighing whether to continue, "because when I looked at you standing on that auction block, I saw someone worth fighting for. You are worth more than gold, Eleanor Dawson. You are worth a hell of a lot more than your father ever understood." The tears came then, hot and fast, streaming down Eleanor's face. She tried to wipe them away, embarrassed, but they kept coming. Isaac pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her. It was clean, though worn soft from many washings. She pressed it to her face, breathing in the scent of sage and horse and sun-baked earth. "Yes," she said when she could speak again. "Yes, I will come work for you. I will work harder than anyone you have ever hired. I promise you that." "I believe you," Isaac said gently. "Now, do you have belongings you need to collect?" Eleanor thought of the dilapidated shack where she and her father had been staying, the single room with a leaking roof and no furniture except for 2 bedrolls on the floor. "No," she said. "I have nothing worth keeping." "Then we will get you what you need," Isaac said. He turned to Perkins. "Thank you for your assistance." Perkins nodded, his eyes bright with curiosity, but he had the sense not to ask questions. Isaac offered Eleanor his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. They walked out of the bank together into the blazing afternoon sun. Hawthorne's Main Street was busy with the usual traffic of a mining town. Wagons hauling ore, men on horseback, women with market baskets, children running between buildings. Eleanor had lived here for 3 months and she hated every inch of it. It was a raw, ugly place, built on greed and desperation. She would not miss it. Isaac led her to a general store, a building that smelled of coffee and leather and pickles. The proprietor, a heavy-set woman with kind eyes, looked up from her counter. "Mr. Holloway," she said warmly. "Good to see you. What can I help you with today, Mrs. Patterson?" Isaac nodded. "I need to outfit this young lady. She will be working at my ranch. She needs practical clothing, sturdy boots, and whatever else you think she might require." Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened slightly as she looked at Eleanor, taking in the threadbare dress, the too thin frame, the haunted eyes. But she was a woman who understood that everyone had a story, and some stories were best left unspoken. "Of course," she said briskly. "Come with me, dear." She led Eleanor to the back of the store, where bolts of fabric and ready-made clothing hung on hooks. "Now, you will want split skirts for riding," Mrs. Patterson said, pulling down several items. "And blouses that can take a beating. Sturdy boots, definitely. Do you have undergarments?" Eleanor felt her face burn. "I have what I am wearing." Mrs. Patterson clicked her tongue sympathetically. "We will get you sorted out." She moved through the store with efficiency, selecting items, holding them up to Eleanor to check the size. Within minutes, she had assembled a pile of clothing: 3 split skirts in brown and gray, 4 blouses in sturdy cotton, a riding jacket, 2 sets of undergarments, thick stockings, and a pair of leather boots that looked like they could withstand anything. "Try these boots, Mrs. Patterson said, handing them to Eleanor. Eleanor sat on a stool and pulled off her worn shoes, embarrassed by the holes in her stockings. The new boots slid on easily, fitting perfectly. They were the nicest things she had ever worn. "How do they feel?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "Wonderful," Eleanor breathed. "Good. Now you will also need a hat for the sun, a warm coat for winter, and some basic toiletries." Mrs. Patterson continued gathering items: a wide-brimmed hat, a heavy canvas coat lined with wool, soap, a comb, tooth powder, a small mirror. When everything was assembled on the counter, Eleanor looked at Isaac anxiously. "This is too much," she said. "I cannot let you spend all this money." "You need these things," Isaac said simply, "and consider it an advance on your wages. You can pay me back over time if it makes you feel better." "I will," Eleanor said firmly. "Every penny." Isaac paid Mrs. Patterson, who wrapped everything in brown paper and tied it with string. "You take care of yourself, dear," she said to Eleanor, patting her hand. "And if you need anything, you come see me." "Thank you," Eleanor said, her throat tight with gratitude. They left the store with Eleanor carrying her bundles. Isaac untied a horse from the hitching post, a beautiful buckskin gelding with intelligent eyes. "This is Copper," he said, stroking the horse's neck. "He is a good, steady fellow. He will carry us both to the ranch." Eleanor had ridden before, though not often. Isaac helped her up into the saddle, then swung up behind her. She was acutely aware of his closeness, his arms reaching around her to hold the reins, the solid warmth of his chest against her back. It should have frightened her, this proximity to a man she barely knew, but instead she felt safe for the first time in years. They rode out of Hawthorne, heading north, following a dusty trail that wound through sagebrush and scrub. The mountains rose in the distance, purple against the bright blue sky. The air was hot and dry, but there was a breeze that made it bearable. Eleanor closed her eyes and let herself just feel the movement of the horse beneath her, the sun on her face, the strength of the man behind her. "Tell me about your ranch," she said after a while. Isaac was quiet for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. "It is not much," he said finally. "Just 160 acres, homestead claim. I filed on it 2 years ago, have been proving it up ever since. I have a cabin, a barn, a corral." I run about 50 head of cattle right now, hoping to expand next year. There is a creek that runs through the property, never goes dry even in the worst heat. Good grass, good water. It is a place where a man can build something, something that lasts. It sounds wonderful, Eleanor said, and she meant it. It is lonely sometimes, Isaac admitted. I am the only one there most days. I hire help during roundup, but otherwise it is just me and the animals. I was thinking about that this morning, actually, before I came into town. Thinking about how a person can be surrounded by open land and still feel boxed in by solitude. Eleanor understood that feeling all too well. Where did you come from before here? She asked. Texas, Isaac said. Grew up on a big ranch down near San Antonio. My father was foreman there. He taught me everything about cattle, about horses, about working the land. He died when I was 16. My mother had passed when I was just a baby, so I had no family left. The ranch owner was kind, let me stay and work, but I always felt like I was just hired help, No stake in the place, no future. So when I turned 21, I took my savings and headed west. Worked as a drover for a few years, saved every penny I could. Then I heard about homestead land opening up in Nevada, and I knew that was my chance. I filed my claim 3 years ago when I was 25, and I've been working it ever since. So you are 28 now? Eleanor asked. Yes, and you are 22, your father said. Yes. Eleanor hesitated, then asked, Did you ever think about marriage, having a family? Isaac was quiet for so long that Eleanor thought she had overstepped, asked something too personal. But then he said, I thought about it. But the kind of life I was living, always moving, always working someone else's land, it did not seem fair to ask a woman to share that. And then when I got the homestead, I was too busy trying to make it work to think about courting anyone. I figured there would be time for that later once I had something solid to offer. He paused. What about you? Did you have someone before all this? No, Eleanor said. My father moved us around too much. Every time he got into debt in one town, we would run to another. Virginia City, Austin, Eureka, now Hawthorne. I never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots, to make friends, to meet anyone. And the men who noticed me, she shuddered, they were not the kind of men a woman wants noticing her. I am sorry, Isaac said quietly. You deserved better than what your father gave you. He was not always like this, Eleanor said, surprising herself. She had not defended her father in years, but old habits died hard. Before my mother died, he was different. He worked in the mines, came home every night, read to me from the Bible, but when the consumption took her, something broke in him. He started drinking to forget, and then gambling, and then everything just spiraled. I tried to help him, tried to get him to stop, but he did not want to be helped. That was not your responsibility, Isaac said. A parent is supposed to take care of their child, not the other way around. I know, Eleanor said, but it is hard to stop feeling responsible, even when you know better. They rode in companionable silence for a while. The land began to change as they traveled north, becoming slightly less barren. Eleanor saw grass growing in patches, and there were more trees along the dry washes. Birds called from the brush, and once she saw a coyote watching them from a ridge, its yellow eyes bright in its gray face. We are on my land now, Isaac said after about an hour of riding. The boundary starts at that line of cottonwoods. Eleanor looked where he pointed and saw a green line of trees marking a watercourse. As they got closer, she could hear the sound of running water, a musical burble that seemed like a miracle in this dry country. That is Willow Creek, Isaac said. It flows year-round from springs up in the mountains. It is the reason I chose this claim. They followed the creek for a little way, and then the cabin came into view. It was small but well built, constructed of logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. The barn was nearby, a sturdy structure with a corral attached. Eleanor could see cattle grazing on the hillside beyond, their red and white hides bright against the dry grass. Isaac dismounted and helped Eleanor down. Her legs were wobbly from the ride, and she had to hold onto his arm for a moment to steady herself. He did not pull away, just stood there solid and patient until she found her balance. "Let me show you around," he said. The cabin was simple but comfortable. One large room served as kitchen, dining area, and living space, with a fireplace dominating one wall. There was a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair near the fireplace, shelves with dishes and supplies, a stove for cooking. A door led to a small bedroom with a bed frame and a chest of drawers. "This is my room," Isaac said, then quickly added, "but you should take it. I will sleep out here by the fire." "No," Eleanor protested. "This is your home. I cannot take your bed." "You can and you will," Isaac said firmly. "It would not be proper otherwise. And I have slept on the ground under the stars more times than I can count. A bedroll by the fireplace is luxury compared to that." Eleanor wanted to argue further, but she could see he had made up his mind. "Thank you," she said instead. "There is a mattress on the frame and blankets in the chest," Isaac said. "It is not fancy, but it is clean. There is a privy out back, and you can wash up in the creek. I know it is not ideal, it is perfect," Eleanor interrupted. "It is more than I have had in a long time." Isaac smiled, that warm, transforming smile that made her heart skip. "I am glad you think so. Now, are you hungry? I was planning to make dinner." "I can cook," Eleanor said quickly. "Please let me, I want to earn my keep." "You have had a long day," Isaac said. "You do not need to start working immediately." "I want to," Eleanor insisted. "Please." Isaac studied her face, then nodded. "All right. There is salt pork in the larder, beans, flour, coffee. Make whatever you like." Eleanor set down her bundles and rolled up her sleeves. The kitchen area was well organized, everything in its place. She found the supplies Isaac had mentioned and set about making dinner. It felt good to have something to do with her hands, something normal and domestic. She made biscuits and fried the salt pork, cooked the beans with a bit of molasses to sweeten them. Isaac brought in water from the creek and set the table, working around her with easy familiarity in the small space. When the meal was ready, they sat down together. The food was simple but good, and Eleanor was hungrier than she had realized. She ate with the focused intensity of someone who had gone without too often. "This is excellent," Isaac said. "You are a good cook." "My mother taught me," Eleanor said. "She said a woman should know how to make a meal out of anything. During the lean times, we got creative." After dinner, Eleanor cleaned up while Isaac went to tend to the animals. She washed the dishes in a basin, dried them, and put them away on the shelves. She swept the floor, tidied the room, trying to make herself useful. When Isaac returned, the cabin was spotless. "You did not have to do all that," he said. "I wanted to," Eleanor replied. "I meant what I said earlier. I want to earn my place here." "You already have," Isaac said gently. "Just by being a person deserving of respect and dignity. But I appreciate the help." The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. They sat on the porch and watched the light fade, the air cooling as darkness fell. Stars began to appear, more stars than Eleanor had ever seen, a blanket of light stretching across the heavens. "It is so beautiful here," she whispered. "Yes," Isaac agreed, but when she glanced at him, he was looking at her, not the sky. Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks and looked away. She was not used to being looked at like she was something precious and worth cherishing. It made her feel vulnerable in a way she did not quite understand. "I should get some rest," she said, standing abruptly. "Tomorrow I will start earning my keep properly." "Sleep well," Isaac said. "And Eleanor, I am glad you are here." "So am I," she said, and she was surprised to realize she meant it. She went into the bedroom and closed the door. The room was small but cozy, the bed covered with a patchwork quilt. She changed into one of her new nightgowns, marveling at the softness of the fabric, the cleanliness of it. She climbed into bed and lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of Isaac moving around in the main room, banking the fire, settling in for the night. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Eleanor felt safe. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her. The weeks that followed established a rhythm to their days. Eleanor woke before dawn and started breakfast, usually biscuits and bacon and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Isaac would come in from the barn where he had been feeding the animals, and they would eat together as the sun rose. Then they would work, side by side, doing whatever needed doing on the ranch. Isaac taught her how to care for the cattle, how to doctor a sick cow, how to mend fences and clean out the barn. She learned to milk the cow he kept for fresh dairy, to collect eggs from the chickens, to churn butter. She proved to have a knack with the horses, a gentleness that the animals responded to. Isaac started letting her help with the breaking and training, and she discovered a joy in working with the big, powerful creatures, earning their trust. In the evenings, after dinner, they would sit on the porch and talk. Eleanor learned more about Isaac's life, about his childhood in Texas, about the years he had spent driving cattle up the long trails to Kansas. He told her about stampedes and river crossings, about nights spent under the stars with only a saddle for a pillow. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, how he wanted to build it into something substantial, a place that would outlast him. Eleanor, in turn, found herself opening up in ways she never had before. She told him about her mother, about the woman's kindness and strength, about the songs she used to sing. She told him about the fear of those years after her mother's death, never knowing when her father would gamble away their last penny, never knowing if she would have a roof over her head or food in her belly. She told him about the shame of standing on that auction block, the terrible helplessness of being treated as property. Isaac listened without judgment, without pity, just with a deep understanding that made her feel seen in a way she never had been before. As the weeks turned into months, Eleanor found herself watching Isaac when he did not know she was looking. She noticed the way his hands moved, sure and capable, whether he was handling a rope or repairing a bridle or pouring coffee. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way his hair fell across his forehead when he took off his hat. She noticed the strength in his shoulders, the grace in the way he moved, the quiet competence he brought to everything he did. And she noticed the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention. There was something in his gaze that made her breath catch, something warm and wondering, like he could not quite believe she was real. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Isaac said, "I have to go into town tomorrow. We need supplies, and I need to check on some things at the land office. Would you like to come?" Eleanor's first instinct was to refuse. She had not been back to Hawthorne since the day Isaac had brought her to the ranch, and she had no desire to return. But then she thought about facing her fears, about not letting her past control her future. "Yes," she said, "I will come." The next morning they hitched up the wagon and made the journey to town. Eleanor wore one of her split skirts and a clean blouse, her hair braided and pinned up under her hat. She looked like a respectable working woman, and the knowledge gave her strength. Hawthorne was busy when they arrived, the streets full of miners and merchants and all the chaos of a boom town. Eleanor kept close to Isaac as they walked, drawing comfort from his solid presence. They went to the general store first, where Mrs. Patterson greeted Eleanor like an old friend. "Look at you," the older woman exclaimed. "You have put on some healthy weight and you have color in your cheeks. Ranch life agrees with you." "It does," Eleanor said, smiling. "It really does." They purchased flour and sugar, coffee and salt, ammunition and kerosene, all the sundries needed for another month. As Isaac was loading the supplies into the wagon, Eleanor heard a familiar voice behind her. Eleanor. She turned and saw her father standing a few feet away. He looked worse than when she had last seen him, thinner, more haggard, his clothes filthy. His hands shook constantly now, and his eyes were yellowed and bloodshot. "What do you want?" Eleanor asked, her voice cold. "I just wanted to see you," Thomas Dawson said, "to tell you I am sorry. For everything." Eleanor felt Isaac come up behind her, a protective presence. "You should go," Isaac said quietly to her father. "Please," Thomas said, ignoring Isaac, his eyes fixed on Eleanor. "I know I have no right to ask, but I am in trouble again. I owe money to some bad men, and if I do not pay, they will kill me. I just need a little help, just a small loan." "No," Eleanor said, the word ringing out clear and final. "I will not give you money. I will not help you. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." "Please," her father begged, tears running down his face. "I am your father." "You stopped being my father the first time you tried to sell me," Eleanor said. "I have nothing for you. Go away and do not come back." Thomas Dawson stared at her, his mouth working, and then he turned and stumbled away into the crowd. Eleanor watched him go, and she felt nothing. No pity, no regret, just a quiet sense of closure. Isaac touched her shoulder gently. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Eleanor said, and she meant it. "I am all right." They finished their errands and headed back to the ranch. On the way, Isaac said, "You were very strong back there. I am proud of you." "I do not feel strong," Eleanor admitted. "I feel like I should feel something more for him. Sadness, at least. But I just feel empty when I think about him." "He hurt you deeply," Isaac said. "It is understandable that you do not have anything left to give him, and it is not your job to save him. He has to save himself." "Do you think he will?" Eleanor asked. Isaac was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "I do not think he will. He has gone too far down that road, but that is his choice, not yours." Eleanor nodded, feeling the weight of truth in Isaac's words. She leaned back against the wagon seat and watched the landscape roll by, the familiar shapes of the mountains, the golden fall grass, the endless sky. That night after dinner, as they sat on the porch, Isaac said, "Eleanor, can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said. "Are you happy here?" he asked. "Truly happy?" Eleanor turned to look at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "Yes," she said. "I am happier than I have ever been." "Why do you ask?" Isaac looked down at his hands, then back up at her. "Because I need to tell you something, and I am afraid it will change things between us. But I cannot keep it to myself anymore." Eleanor's heart began to beat faster. "What is it?" Isaac took a deep breath. "Eleanor, I have come to care for you, more than I should, probably, more than is sensible. When I look at you, I see someone brave and strong and beautiful, inside and out. I see someone I want to share my life with, not just my ranch. I know it has only been a few months, and I know you may not feel the same way, but I had to tell you. I had to be honest." Eleanor stared at him, her mind reeling. She had known, on some level, that there was something growing between them, something more than friendship or employer and employee. But hearing Isaac say it out loud, hearing the emotion in his voice, made it real in a way it had not been before. "I care for you too," she said softly. "I have been trying not to, trying to keep my distance, because I was afraid. Afraid that you were just being kind, that you did not really feel anything for me. Afraid that I was just grateful to you for saving me, and I was confusing gratitude with something else. But Isaac, when I see you, when I am with you, I feel something I have never felt before. I feel like I have found home. Isaac's face transformed with joy. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. "You have found home," he said, "because this is your home, Eleanor, for as long as you want it to be." "I want it to be forever," Eleanor whispered. Isaac leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she did not. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Eleanor felt something inside her unfurl, like a flower opening to the sun. She had been kissed before, by boys in towns she barely remembered, clumsy and presumptuous kisses that had left her feeling nothing but uncomfortable. But this was different. This was a kiss that promised safety and passion and partnership, all rolled into one. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly. I want to marry you if you will have me." "Yes," Eleanor said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will have you." They were married in early November by the circuit preacher who passed through Hawthorne once a month. It was a simple ceremony, with Mrs. Patterson and her husband standing as witnesses, held in the small church at the edge of town. Eleanor wore a new dress of deep blue calico that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew, and Isaac wore his best clothes, his hair slicked back and his boots polished. When the preacher asked if she took this man to be her husband, Eleanor said, "I do," with her whole heart. And when Isaac slid a simple gold band onto her finger, she felt like the luckiest woman alive. They held a small celebration at the ranch, with Mrs. Patterson and her husband, and a few of Isaac's friends from neighboring homesteads. There was fiddle music and dancing, roast beef and baked potatoes, apple pie and fresh bread. Eleanor danced with Isaac under the stars, his arms around her, and she thought about how far she had come from that day on the auction block. That night, as man and wife for the first time, Isaac carried her over the threshold of the cabin. He set her down gently in the bedroom which they now shared, and looked at her with such tenderness that she felt tears spring to her eyes. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you know you are loved," Isaac said. "I will never take you for granted. I will never make you feel less than the treasure you are." "I know," Eleanor said. "I trust you." And she did. For the first time in her life, she trusted completely, without reservation or fear. Their first year of marriage was filled with hard work and simple joys. They expanded the herd, adding another 30 head of cattle. They planted a garden in the spring, growing vegetables that Eleanor preserved for the winter. They improved the cabin, adding a second room and a real stove for the kitchen. They talked about the future, about dreams they had never dared to voice before. Eleanor discovered she had a gift for healing, both animals and people. When a neighbor's child fell ill with fever, Eleanor went to help, making poultices and teas from herbs she gathered. The child recovered and word spread. Soon, people were coming to the ranch seeking Eleanor's help with ailments both minor and serious. She never charged for her services, accepting only what people could afford to give, whether that was a basket of eggs or a sack of flour or simply heartfelt thanks. Isaac was so proud of her he could barely contain it. "You are making a real difference," he told her one evening after she had spent the day tending to a woman with a difficult pregnancy. "People trust you. They need you." "I need them too," Eleanor said. "I spent so many years feeling worthless, like I was just a burden. Being able to help people, it gives me purpose." In the spring of their second year together, Eleanor realized she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. His eyes went wide, and then he let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Eleanor asked, though she could see that he was. Happy. Isaac set her down and cupped her face in his hands. Eleanor, I am over the moon. I am going to be a father. We are going to be a family. The pregnancy was not easy. Eleanor suffered from nausea in the early months that left her weak and unable to keep food down. Isaac was endlessly patient, bringing her dry crackers and weak tea, holding her hair back when she was sick, rubbing her back when she ached. As the months passed and her belly grew, the nausea faded but was replaced by exhaustion and swollen ankles. Still, Eleanor felt blessed. Every kick from the baby was a reminder of the miracle growing inside her, the new life she and Isaac had created together. Mrs. Patterson came to stay at the ranch for the final weeks before the baby was due, bringing her experience from having birthed 8 children of her own. She and Eleanor sat together on the porch in the warm September evenings, sewing tiny clothes and blankets, talking about motherhood and marriage and all the things that mattered. You and Isaac have something special, Mrs. Patterson said one evening. I see the way he looks at you like you hung the moon, and the way you look at him like he is your whole world. That is the kind of love that lasts. I never thought I would have this, Eleanor admitted. I never thought I deserved it. Oh, honey, Mrs. Patterson said, setting down her sewing to take Eleanor's hand. Everyone deserves love. Everyone deserves a chance at happiness. What your father did to you, that was his failing, not yours. You always deserved better. Eleanor blinked back tears, hormones making her more emotional than usual. Isaac told me once that I was worth more than gold. I am starting to believe him. Good, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. You keep believing that. The baby came on a warm night in late September, arriving after 12 hours of hard labor that left Eleanor exhausted and triumphant. Isaac held her hand through it all, his face white with worry, his grip never faltering. When the baby finally emerged with a lusty cry, Mrs. Patterson held up the tiny, red-faced creature and announced, "It is a boy." Eleanor wept with joy as Mrs. Patterson cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Eleanor's arms. He was perfect, with a thatch of dark hair and eyes that would probably be gray like his father's. Isaac sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his son with wonder. "He is beautiful," Isaac whispered. "He is perfect." "What should we name him?" Eleanor asked. They had discussed names endlessly over the past months but had not settled on anything. Now, looking at their son, Isaac said, "What about Thomas? After your mother's father, you said he was a good man." Eleanor had told Isaac about her grandfather, her mother's father, who had been a Methodist preacher with a kind heart and a gift for making people laugh. He had died before Eleanor was born, but her mother had spoken of him often and with great love. "Thomas Holloway," Eleanor said, testing the name. "I like it, but maybe Thomas James after your father." Isaac's father had been named James, and Eleanor knew that Isaac had loved him dearly. Isaac's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "Thomas James Holloway," he said. "That is a strong name." A good name. And so their son was named. Little Thomas proved to be a healthy baby with powerful lungs and an insatiable appetite. Eleanor spent her days caring for him, nursing him and changing him and marveling at the miracle of his existence. Isaac was a devoted father, getting up with Eleanor for the night feedings, walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, singing to him in a surprisingly sweet baritone. The ranch continued to thrive. With the money from selling cattle, Isaac was able to hire a hand to help with the work, a young man named Henry who was proving to be reliable and hardworking. This gave Isaac more time to spend with Eleanor and Thomas, time he treasured. When Thomas was 6 months old and Eleanor had recovered her strength, they took him to town to show him off. Mrs. Patterson was beside herself with delight, holding the baby and cooing over him. Other women gathered around to admire him, and Eleanor felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. These were her people now, her community. She was not an outsider, not a girl without a home. She was Eleanor Holloway, wife of Isaac, mother of Thomas, healer and neighbor and friend. As they were leaving the general store, Eleanor saw a familiar figure slouched in the alley. It took her a moment to recognize her father. He had deteriorated so much. Thomas Dawson was skin and bones, his face ravaged by drink and dissipation. He was coughing deep, racking coughs that shook his whole frame. He saw her and tried to straighten up. "Eleanor," he croaked. Eleanor stopped. Isaac, carrying Thomas, came to stand beside her. "Do you want to talk to him?" Isaac asked quietly. Eleanor looked at her father, this man who had given her life and then tried to sell it. She felt pity, but nothing more. "No," she said. "There is nothing left to say. Please," her father begged, stumbling toward her. "Just listen." He was seized by another coughing fit, this one so violent it brought him to his knees. Eleanor saw blood on his lips when he pulled his hand away from his mouth. "He is dying," Isaac said quietly. "Consumption, probably, or something similar." Eleanor knew Isaac was right. She could see the signs, the same signs her mother had shown before the end. Part of her wanted to walk away, to let Thomas Dawson die alone as he had lived. But another part of her, the healer, the woman who had learned compassion through her own suffering, could not do it. "Help me get him to the wagon," she said to Isaac. Isaac looked at her, searching her face. "Are you sure?" "No," Eleanor said honestly, "but I will regret it if I do not try." They loaded Thomas Dawson into the back of the wagon and took him to the ranch. Eleanor set him up in the barn, making a comfortable pallet for him, bringing him water and broth. She tended to him as she would any patient, with professional detachment, but without cruelty. Her father lasted a week. In that time, he tried to apologize, to explain himself, to justify what he had done. Eleanor listened without comment. On the last day, when he was struggling for each breath, he said, "I am sorry I was not a better father to you." "I am sorry too," Eleanor said, and she was. She was sorry for all of it, for the years wasted, for the potential lost, for the man he could have been if he had made different choices. Thomas Dawson died that evening as the sun was setting. Isaac built a coffin and they buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple wooden cross to mark the grave. Eleanor did not cry. She had no tears left for him, but she felt a sense of peace, knowing she had done the right thing at the end. "Are you all right?" Isaac asked her that night as they lay in bed, Thomas sleeping in his cradle beside them. "Yes," Eleanor said. "I think I am. He is at peace now, and so am I. That part of my life is over." "And now?" Isaac asked. "Now we live," Eleanor said, rolling over to face him. "We raise our son. We build our ranch. We love each other. We make a life worth living." Isaac kissed her, slow and deep. "That sounds perfect." The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Thomas grew from a baby into a curious toddler, then an active boy who followed his father around the ranch like a shadow. Eleanor had 2 more children, a daughter they named Margaret after Isaac's mother, and another son they called Benjamin. The cabin was expanded again to accommodate the growing family, adding more bedrooms and a larger living space. The ranch prospered beyond their wildest dreams. Isaac's reputation as a fair dealer and a good stockman spread, and he was able to buy more land, increasing their holdings to over 500 acres. They hired more hands, built a larger barn, upgraded the corrals. Eleanor continued her healing work, and people came from miles around seeking her help. She delivered babies and set broken bones, treated fevers and eased the pain of the dying. She became known throughout the region as a woman of skill and compassion. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Eleanor away from the ranch for a full week, leaving the children in Mrs. Patterson's capable care. They traveled to San Francisco, a journey Eleanor had never dreamed she would make. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants, saw the ocean for the first time. Eleanor stood on the beach with her feet in the cold water, holding Isaac's hand, and marveled at how her life had turned out. "You remember that day in Hawthorne?" Isaac asked her as they watched the sun set over the Pacific. "When I first saw you on that auction block, I remember," Eleanor said. "I remember thinking I was at the end, that there was no hope left. I knew in that moment that I would do whatever it took to free you," Isaac said. "I could not have explained why. I just knew that you were important, that you mattered." "You told me I was worth more than gold," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. "You are," Isaac said, pulling her close. "You are worth more than all the gold in California, all the land in Nevada, all the cattle on the range. You are my heart, Eleanor. You are my everything." Eleanor turned in his arms and kissed him, tasting salt from the sea spray on his lips. "And you are mine," she said. "You saved me, Isaac. Not just that day, but every day since. You showed me what love is supposed to be, what family is supposed to be. You gave me a life I never thought I could have." "We gave each other that life," Isaac corrected gently. "You made me whole, Eleanor. Before you, I was just a man with land and cattle. Now I am a husband, a father, a man with purpose beyond just survival. You did that." They stood together on the beach as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Eleanor thought about that scared girl on the auction block, about how impossible this moment would have seemed to her then. And she thought about all the moments that had led her here, both the terrible ones and the beautiful ones, and she felt grateful for all of it, because it had brought her to this place, this man, this life. When they returned to the ranch, their children ran to greet them. Thomas, now 10 years old and serious like his father, Margaret 7 and full of mischief, Benjamin 5 and sweet-natured. Eleanor gathered them all in her arms, breathing in the smell of them, feeling the solid weight of their bodies, and she knew this was what happiness felt like. The years continued to unfold. Thomas grew into a capable young man who took over more and more of the ranch work, learning everything his father could teach him. Margaret discovered a gift for horses, training them with patience and skill that rivaled Eleanor's. Benjamin, the dreamer of the family, loved books and learning, and Isaac and Eleanor sent him to school in Carson City when he was old enough, hoping he might become a teacher or a lawyer. Isaac's hair turned gray at the temples, and lines appeared around his eyes from squinting into the sun. Eleanor's hands became rougher from work, and her body softer from bearing children. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the same people they had been that day in Hawthorne, the cowboy and the girl he had saved, the two souls who had found each other against all odds. On their 20th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Thomas was married now, to a sweet girl named Sarah from a neighboring ranch, and they had just welcomed their first child, a daughter. Margaret was courting a young horse trainer, and Benjamin was home from university, full of ideas and energy. Mrs. Patterson was there, older but still spry, along with neighbors and friends from all over the valley. As the sun set and the party continued, Isaac pulled Eleanor away from the crowd, leading her to the hill where they had buried her father so many years before. The simple wooden cross had been replaced with a more substantial stone marker, at Eleanor's request. "Why did we come up here?" Eleanor asked. Isaac turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Because I wanted to be away from everyone else for a moment. I wanted to tell you something." "What is it?" Eleanor asked, her heart swelling with love for this man who, after 20 years, could still make her feel like a young bride. "I wanted to tell you that you have given me the best life a man could ask for," Isaac said. 20 years ago, I thought I was saving you. But the truth is, you saved me just as much. You gave me a family, a home, a reason to build something lasting. You gave me love. Every single day with you has been a gift." Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. "I love you so much," she said. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I will love you," Isaac said, "for more than all the gold in the world, forever and always." They kissed there on the hilltop as the stars came out, the sounds of celebration drifting up from the ranch below. When they finally walked back down hand in hand, they found their children and grandchild waiting for them, surrounded by friends and loved ones, all gathered to celebrate a love story that had started with desperation and a cowboy's courage, and had grown into something beautiful and enduring. Eleanor looked around at all these faces, all these people who were part of her life, and she felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. She had been saved, yes, but more than that, she had been loved. She had been valued. She had been told she was worth more than gold, and she had spent 20 years learning to believe it. And in the believing, in the loving, in the building of a life from the ashes of despair, she had found something more precious than any treasure. She had found herself, and she had found home. As the night deepened and the party wound down, Eleanor stood on the porch of the cabin, watching the last guests depart. Isaac came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "Beyond measure," Eleanor replied, leaning into his warmth. They stood together in the darkness, looking out over the land they had built together, the family they had created, the life they had forged from nothing but hope and hard work and love. And Eleanor knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the person she was meant to be with, living exactly the life she was meant to live. She had been bought and sold, traded like property, treated as something less than human. But Isaac had seen her worth when no one else had declared her value when the world had said she had none. He had not just saved her that day in Hawthorne. He had given her the chance to save herself, to become the woman she was always meant to be. And that, Eleanor thought as she tilted her face up for Isaac's kiss, was worth more than all the gold that had ever been mined from Nevada's hills, more than all the wealth in the world. It was worth everything. The end.